that. It was kind of like a new word in a way. And then we came up with a script 28 days later, and we shot it on consumer cameras. But I remember Anthony saying to me, it's all very well working in this format, you know, but he said, I'll never get an Oscar. There was a sequence in it at the beginning where the character Cillian Murphy wanders around a deserted London.
Hello!
And we would not have been able to achieve the film on film because we had to stop traffic. We didn't have the money to do it. So what we would do is we'd just hold the traffic briefly. But because we were on these cameras, we could use 10 of them because they're so cheap. And he could walk through central London, an area of it, and we had 10 cameras on it. So you'd only have to stop the traffic for a few minutes and then you would actually have 10 shots. That was an enormous advantage.
I place cameras around, not coincidentally and not badly and not loosely. I try to control every angle and I know roughly where it's best when it's going to be used. But that said, you can let it run a bit, and because it's digital, you get something.
If you were in a wide shot with a small figure in it, they were just like 2 or 3 pixels. I mean, there was nothing there, they were just a colour. Quality-wise, if you put it up against an exact copy of it on film, the film would be immeasurably superior. But you could shoot illegally and surreptitiously without people knowing. You could do unconventional things. And the rhythm of film, which had been passed on since it began, and crews have learned, you interrupted that. I loved that freedom. And I got the taste for it then. And I knew once we'd shot that sequence that I was going to work on it now. That was what I wanted to work on. It makes the editor's job extraordinary because they're often ploughing through masses and masses and masses of material.
In the 1970s and 80s, electronics companies began working on solutions to replace film editing. For over 100 years, editing meant physically cutting and connecting pieces of film.
When you used to go to an editing room, they brought in the trim basket, they took the film out, they looked at it through the moviola, and then you slapped it together like this. You remember with the white gloves, and they were incredibly fast at it.
I find the frame, sometimes splicing to the point of getting your fingertips bloodied, that was really the blood in the film. So, you really had it, and now it's pressing little buttons.
Now this is the floppy disk that we're all familiar with.
Early editing systems used multiple magnetic disks, tape machines, and laser disks to store and read digitized film. Most of these systems were enormous and very costly.
The first thing that happened really that changed everything, I think, was the digital editing machine, which meant that dailies had to be converted from film into tape. So that started a whole thing going.
We started a picture editing system that was all digital. We had the first edit droid working in 1980, and eventually we sold the system to Avid.
By the late 1980s, Avid had developed digital editing into a compact, cost-effective, computer-based system.
When I first saw the Avid as a demo, the image quality was blocky and tiny, and I said, this is going to be really good when they get the image quality right in about 5 years' time.
Why not try it on the Avid? And, I'm also one of those early adopter people. I like to leap into the unknown. I remember on the English Patient, I suddenly really looked at the image and said, oh no, how am I going to be able to do this?
When I'd work with older editors, they'll often talk about the time when computers were starting to come in and say, they were very resistant to it because they weren't familiar with computers. They were just scared that they didn't know enough about it. If you push this button or if you accidentally turned it off wrong or turned it on wrong, that everything would be gone, whereas that could never happen if you actually physically had the film in your hand.
They thought, that's not editing. Editing is... So when you're editing a movie on film, that's just a technology. The art form is the manipulation of images to tell a story.
It was extremely difficult for me to learn because I hadn't used a computer. I thought a mouse was something that ran across the floor. I was that ignorant. Right. But I learned, and I kicked the machine quite a bit. But once I'd got going on it, I was okay, and I liked it.
There's no film in the editing bay. It's all a kind of...
drives and it's quiet. I used to hear, the reels on the benches. There's a very noisy kind of bustling atmosphere. And now it's very quiet. It's almost like, you know, I can burn incense and light candles.
Digital brings you speed, and it almost challenges you in the sense of, can I think that fast? Do I need time to breathe?
Sometimes these young editors who are very interesting and doing extremely interesting work, but they don't always have the time to just sit back and think about what they're doing. And I think that if they work on film, they have probably trained their minds to do that a little bit more. And so it's a different way of thinking, really.
Film taught you a discipline that is gone a little bit from the computer, because once you put the scissors in, you've then got to join it back together with sticky tape, and it bumps through the machine, so you're much more decisive about it.
Has editing gotten better because there's infinite choice? I'm not so sure. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of movies that have gotten worse because you manipulated it to death. We may have lost something.
The cut in Lawrence of Arabia where he blows the match out.
It is recognized that you have a funny sense of fun.
That was dissolved in the script. And if you'd been on a digital as we are today, we would have only ever seen it as a dissolve. In those days, the film was butted together like that, just with a direct cut. And so when we saw it, we thought, wow, that's fantastic. It just worked, it just was magic. You know, when you feel that feeling.
Digital is this unbelievably malleable plastic of imagery and sound. And that's seductive, because that's what we do. You know, we are sculptors of images and sound. It's not that you can't do it with film. It's just that it's harder to do that and make it look good.